Well, hello and welcome to In the Growth Space. Thank you for joining me. My name is David McGlennon. I'm your host, and I am super excited to have you join me here on this particular episode. This is going to be a fun one. But before we get into a little bit about this episode, I just want to invite you to subscribe to the podcast. I'd also love it if you would go out and give us a rating. 5 stars, if possible. We'd also love you to just review the podcast. Give us maybe a sentence or two of what the podcast has helped you with, or maybe a guest that you really appreciated. We'd really appreciate that review because we want to share the podcast with more leaders just like you. And to that end, if you would just share this episode with a friend that might want to get something out of today's conversation, or that could get something out of today's conversation, that would be amazing. You know, on this podcast, we are all about growth in a variety of different areas, because we know that growth gives us an amazing depth of our life and an enjoyment of our work. And it also gives us the ability to face challenges when we grow, and challenges help us to grow and give us that fulfillment in our lives. And so today is really all about growth in a certain focus area, and that focus area is around emotional intelligence. And my guest today is Regina Bryan. And some of you may know Regina. If you came to our summit, I think it was in 2022, she was a speaker at that summit. What an amazing session that she brought. I know that you guys will just absolutely love today's conversation. Let me tell you just a little bit more about Regina. First and foremost, this is her second time on the podcast. I think she was in season 2. I think it's our episode number 96. I think that's right. Episode 96. I'm pretty sure that's right. But Regina is an emotional intelligence specialist. And you know, she just brings a wealth of expertise to help individuals, to help teams, to help businesses, organization, just to unlock the potential that's within them and within that group. And she does that by helping them to master the art of self-awareness. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. Self-awareness around our own emotions, having empathy, and really building relationships, connecting with others. When Regina isn't serving clients, you can find her at her home in Atlanta with her husband of 18 years, Roger, amazing guy. She also plays piano, or she's also working with her nonprofit that's near and dear to her heart called Cares for Kids. When they're not traveling, they're focused on owning their restaurant. It's a Riverside Pizza. It's a franchise in Atlanta. They have amazing pizza. If you've ever been to Turning Point, you've tasted that pizza. It's primo, especially after a day out on the ropes course. So I'm so excited to bring you this conversation with my good friend Regina around emotional intelligence. I would love to hear what your feedback is, what your takeaways are. So when you're finished with the episode, do me a quick favor. Shoot me a quick note, david@davidmcglennon.com. Let me know what your takeaway is. Maybe go out to Regina's website and take one of her emotional intelligence reports and assessments. I think you'll really benefit from this. All right, without further ado, let's get into my conversation with my good friend, Regina Bryan. Regina, it is so great to have you back on In the Growth Space podcast. Welcome.
Oh, David, I'm excited to be back with you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. You know, we were just catching up off camera, off before we hit record. And it's so good to always, just kind of reconnect and revisit, kind of where our lives have been. And I'm so excited for the growth that you've had, and especially around the subject of emotional intelligence. You really are kind of the go-to for emotional intelligence. And I love that. And I guess I want to start with just kind of laying the groundwork about what got you into emotional intelligence. What drew you into that subject matter? I'd love to hear.
Not a great look for me, David. David, because I was just a shy kid. My emotions were all over the place, right? My poor mom and dad probably thought, what are we going to do with this child that cries all the time? And, I was just one of those kids, those preteens, really sort of at the mercy of my emotions. It
Oh
was, it was
man.
just not good. And I think I just was so sensitive. Not there's anything
Mm,
wrong with that. It just
mm.
wasn't working for me. My
Sure.
emotions weren't working for me.
Sure.
And then I'll never forget, it was September the 8th, 1986.
Oh
And
man.
that was the day that the Oprah Winfrey Show made its national TV debut.
I love it.
And, growing up, I looked up to Oprah
Of
because
course.
here
Yeah.
was a woman
Yeah.
that laughed a lot, cried a lot. Her emotions worked for her.
Mm,
And I was 12 years old. So I came of age during the season of Oprah. And I got to see this woman have a way with people.
mm,
And I thought, I want to have a way with people too. She
yeah.
just really knew how to make her emotions work for her. She knew how to connect and showed empathy. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was watching someone really live in the full awareness of emotional intelligence. I
Mm,
just knew that was someone who had a way with people and a way with connecting with people. And I wanted to have that.
yeah.
So, as this shy kid, so driven by emotions, being 12 years old and watching this woman come on TV, it changed a lot of things for me. And I was so
Yeah.
interested in emotions and connecting.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that what a great story. It's always amazing how, people in our lives, whether they're celebrities, whether they're people that we see
Yeah.
on television or the movies or wherever, have an impact on our lives and can really almost change the trajectory of our lives. I love that story. I don't think I ever
For
heard that
sure.
before.
Yeah. I've shared it here and there, but I'm so glad you asked me because people ask me about that.
Right.
And from that moment, I sort of became obsessed with how do I show up in a way that connects? How do I
Hmm.
show up in a way, keeping my authentic self?
Yeah.
Because I'm a crier, I'm a laugher, I'm the first one to cry, I'm the first one to laugh. How
Uh,
do I use that in a way that serves me and other people?
yeah.
And figuring that out just became my journey and something
Mm.
I'm passionate about.
Well, and I think it's a subject I think that I know that I often talk about with our emerging leaders in the Emerging Leader Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I would love to maybe talk about why is it important really to understand our emotions and understand
Yeah.
our emotional intelligence and how that kind of interacts with everything else that we do as a leader.
Yeah. David, here's why it's important. I'm so glad you asked because here it is for everybody. Emotions are the biggest part of what makes us human.
Mm, yeah, that's
If you
true.
just take that in, emotions are the
Mm,
biggest part of what makes us human. We're
yeah,
not creatures of logic, we're creatures of emotion.
yeah.
And our work, our lives, our relationships,
Mm,
everything revolves around our ability to manage them well.
yeah.
And that's really the bottom line. That's like the starting point is we're
Hmm.
emotional creatures. So now
Yeah.
what? So
Yeah.
that's why emotional intelligence is so important.
Well, and as leaders, we're leading humans, right? We're not leading artificial intelligence. Well, sort of we are, but
Exactly.
we're not leading robots, we're not leading machines, we're leading
That's right.
humans. And so in order to do that, we have to understand emotions. And first and foremost, we have to understand our own emotions. So how do we
That's right.
do that? How do we understand our own emotions?
Another great question. And I get asked that all the time because people think there's a magic bullet or it must be hard and it must be grueling. And it really isn't. It's just about, first and foremost, I recommend, and you're great at this, David, is journaling.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah,
you have
absolutely.
to you have to be able to take a reflective look to your own emotions. What did I experience today? What did I feel today?
Hmm.
Good or bad? What were the emotions that I was
Mm.
primarily tied in today, and what were their triggers?
Ah,
So
yeah.
if we can understand our emotions and what triggers them, that
Hmm.
is the starting point. That's how
Mm.
I think, okay, this is something that pushes a button. Why is that?
Yeah, yeah.
This is what brings out the best in me. this is what brings out the worst in me, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding that, tapping into that. And I
Mm.
wish it were something harder. I wish it was something more difficult. And I think all the things that are easy in life, we tend to take for granted, or we tend to think it doesn't matter.
Right.
But that is what the key starting point is journaling and being very reflective
Mm.
about your day, about your week, when you're
Mm-hmm.
feeling your best and when you're not.
I love that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that for those of our audience who aren't journalers yet, I would encourage you to do exactly that. Just pick up
You have to.
just pick up any kind of a journal, blank pages. Even if there's some prompts in there, if you want some prompts, contact me. I can give you
Ooh,
all kinds of
good.
prompts.
Uh-huh.
But I think that, as I think about, journaling and writing about my emotions or how I felt in the day,
Yeah.
sometimes I think I miss like the words for or the labels for what I'm feeling. And I guess, one of the things I know that you work with, leaders on is being able to identify what is that feeling?
Yeah.
What's the label for that feeling or that emotion that's within us? Talk a little bit about that if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest piece for people in general, especially us adults. And I
Yeah.
think those of us at a certain age, if you we reflect back on our childhood, most
Mm,
of us didn't grow up. And even if you had loving parents like I did,
yeah.
we just didn't have parents that spoke to us about here's what you're feeling and why, and here's what this
Right.
emotion is. It just didn't happen
Right.
because
Yeah.
our own parents weren't aware of it. So as adults, we really don't understand the labels. We don't
Mm,
understand the differentiation between frustration and disappointment and true anger, and
yeah.
maybe those little nuances.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of life. And so some of the things that I teach as I have my different classes and workshops
Mm-hmm.
is we talk about really understanding the nuances between the different emotions.
Mm,
And that's okay if you don't get that. I think the starting point is here's what I felt and why. And
yeah.
when you get coaching, I work with people who have no idea how to label any emotions. And
Yeah.
then 3 months or 6 months later, they're at a different place because we
Mm,
really kind of dig into some of those nuances. What
mm-hmm.
is frustration? How is that different than just anger or disappointment? And how can I differentiate those, and why it's important? And
Mm,
sometimes it's important because it helps us understand the certain trigger points and how we're
yeah.
reacting and how we're responding.
Right.
If I'm truly just disappointed, maybe heartbroken,
Mm,
versus when I'm really frustrated or angry.
mm,
And with that comes different awareness. So without getting too far down in the
yeah.
weeds,
Yeah.
sometimes that just helps our overall awareness and identify some of those triggers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that as I think about being able to identify some of those triggers, I think for leaders, it's important to be able to understand what is going to trigger you because people may say a word or a phrase and man, it can send you off in a,
Right.
in a heartbeat, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration, whatever that emotion is. But
Right.
understanding that I think is really important.
And And beyond that is with emotional intelligence, hopefully you're getting to a point where you have fewer triggers.
Right,
The key to
right.
not having your buttons pushed is not to have any buttons.
And there
And
you
people are
go.
like, whoa, how do I
Yeah,
get there? Well, it's
yeah.
just really understanding that um, not it's not handing over the power.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the ability, David, to push a lot of my buttons or some of my worst buttons, I'm handing over my power to you.
Oh
And
yeah.
the way that I show up in the world, the way that I react and respond is now tied to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm.
just, that's not a
Yeah.
good feeling. If
Right.
I'm really going to be responsible for me, I have to reduce my number of buttons and triggers.
Yeah.
And so that is a place where people,
Mm.
it's a weird thing for a lot of people because we grew up hearing so and so made me mad and so made me feel this way and you made me do this.
Yeah.
Well, it's about reducing that. And I love our mentor Paul
Yeah.
Martinelli, he says if anyone can make you mad, glad or sad, then you've been had.
Exactly. I
That's
love
my
that.
favorite.
I
That's my
know.
favorite because then I'm turning over the responsibility for how I feel to you.
Right.
I'm
Right.
giving away my power.
Rather than
It's
owning it yourself.
it's
Yeah.
crushing. It's soul crushing to hand over my power to someone else. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes people feel like, oh, my emotions are out of control and they're based on all these other circumstances. Well, it can
Mm.
feel that way until we know better.
Well, and I know that self-awareness is the key. And so being able to take an assessment to be able to
Yeah.
understand where our natural tendencies are
Mhm.
is really kind of the starting point, right?
It's so good because I love doing the assessments, and people are like, well, what if it doesn't? What I don't know if this is me. That's okay. It's a
Yeah.
starting point.
Right, right.
And with the EQ assessment that I've been using over the last several years, I have not had one person say, this is totally not me. Most
Yeah.
people are like, oh my God,
Yeah,
this is
right.
a little crazy. It's not 100% us because
Yeah.
behavior is too complicated.
Yeah.
However, when people are going through their assessment, it's eye opening. There's aha moments, there's light
Mm,
bulbs
yeah.
because it's understanding where am I today?
Hmm.
And all the assessments are for anybody that might be interested, it's just a snapshot of
Mm,
where you are in this moment today, how
right
you see
here.
you today.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and you talked earlier about, kind of reducing the buttons so that others can't push those buttons.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's, what I would call the inner work. Like how do
Oh,
you do that? Like what's the process to do some of that inner work to reduce those buttons so that others can't push them?
yeah, so it might be if you've had some heavy trauma in your life, and David, that's not our area. You and I are
No,
coaches.
yeah, right,
But
right.
I've met people that have had a lot of heavy trauma. And so therapy might be a place to start.
Yeah,
But
sure.
when you get around a good coach, that if you're
Mhm.
really forward facing and you really want to move forward,
Mhm.
coaching can help with a lot of that because you are identifying your goals. And I know that's one thing you and I talked a little bit about off camera
Yeah.
is knowing your purpose and your goals, having
Yeah.
a forward vision.
Mhm.
Don't knock that in terms of helping with the
Yes.
reduction of triggers because a lot of time it is a lack of understanding who we are, what we
Mhm.
want from life that
Mhm.
spins us a little bit out of control. The more
Yeah.
out of control I feel, the more triggers I have.
Oh, sure.
When I bring clarity, and clarity is so huge
Mm.
to my life, to what I want, to who I am, you'll be
Mm.
surprised how the reduction in triggers really start to happen.
Mm.
That out of
Yeah.
control feeling is lessened when I
Mhm.
know when I'm grounded in my purpose, when I'm grounded in my passion, my strengths, when I'm working in my strength zone.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised at how the nuances I've been seeing have been with some of my own coaching clients and some people I've
Yeah.
been in workshops with, the connection points being made by that.
Right.
It's having clarity of purpose really that helps that. And
Yeah.
and I didn't think it was going to go that direction when I thought about reducing triggers. Well, that's
Yeah.
traumatic, that's inner work. It is, but it's also just the work of understanding your future and being clear on who you are and what you want from life. That
Yeah.
helps you kind of wrap yourself around your responsibilities, and it
Mhm.
gets rid of a lot of that out of control feeling.
Yeah, it reminds me of just having getting clear on what that vision is. What is that vision that you have for
Yeah,
your life, and being able to have that vision so that you can move towards it. And if that vision is, I am someone who doesn't have triggers. I am someone who is in control of my
yeah,
emotions. All of the I am statements that we talk about at the
right.
Turning Point retreat, right? And
Exactly.
and I also think about the quote, the Henry David Thoreau quote, because
Oh,
we have to imagine the life that we want. And so in order to
mhm.
do that, we have to think in pictures and we have to clarify that vision of
So
someone
good.
who is not triggered, someone who is calm, someone who is under
Right.
control. And I think that being able to do that is so important. And I think that's why this emotional intelligence subject matter is really important for leaders everywhere.
It is because emotional intelligence is our GPS.
Mm,
It guides us as we
mm,
live out our values and our intentions. So, David, you're very health oriented.
yeah,
And I've been on and off that in my life. It happens to be on right now. The vision in my life is I'm going to take care of myself physically. If that's the
yeah.
vision, that's the person I'm creating, that's the goal.
Mm-hmm,
Well, my emotions have got to work for me and not
mm-hmm.
against me. Because how
Right.
many times, I haven't done this yet this year, but how many times have we said, I'm going to go work out?
Yeah.
And then the morning comes and the alarm goes off and it's, I don't feel like it.
Or it's 13
I'm not
below
knocking,
zero outside.
especially where you live.
I
We've had a
know.
lot of cold weather, but you always have cold weather.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Okay, we've all done that.
Mm-hmm.
Or I've had such a rotten day. I'm reaching
Mm,
for the chips and I'm reaching for the ice cream because they
mm,
make me feel better.
mm-hmm.
that is when our emotions are working most against us.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
when I'm allowing my emotions to supersede my goals and the
And to
clarity about who I say I want to be in my life.
and drive your
And
behavior, right? Yeah.
exactly. And instead of me saying, I'm going to direct my emotions, I'm going to channel them, it is
Yeah.
so easy in our world. It's happening fast. We're
Mm,
distracted. And it's
yeah.
so easy to think my emotions control me. It's so easy
Right.
to just allow that to happen. If I say to myself too many mornings, I'm not going to go to the gym, my
Yeah.
emotions are now running me. I'm
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
mercy of my emotions. And just that simple example that so many
Hmm.
people can relate to.
Yeah, I love that. Especially, here we are, as we're recording this, we're in January. So,
Yeah.
that's an appropriate topic, right? So I guess maybe share with the listeners some strategies to be able to master our emotions so that our emotions don't master us.
That's such a great question. And I think it starts with number one, identifying your goals. Your
Mm,
emotions are going to get the best of you if you don't have a direction.
yeah.
So if your goal is to be calmer person or to go to
Hmm.
the gym or whatever that is in sales, whatever your goals are, is to really know what they are, to get
Hmm.
super clear about them
Yeah.
and put together a plan of achievement. But here's what I'm learning, David. The longer I've been in personal growth and know people like yourself, and I have a coach. I am a coach. Accountability,
Yeah. So
accountability.
true. So
I'm
true.
telling you that in this cold weather we've been having in Atlanta,
Yeah.
there's no way I would have gone to the gym the number of times I have so far this year if I did not have my personal trainer waiting for me.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
you need a plan and you need people.
Yep.
Period. End of story. Because
I
here's the
love it.
truth: if you could have done it by yourself already, you would have.
Yep. Yep.
You
You
would have
know,
done it by yourself.
it's so interesting that you say that because just beyond my camera here, I have a collage of a picture of my workout partner who has been my workout partner. Well, over the last several years, he hasn't, just because we're in a different geographic locations, but we are still close as friends. And
Wow.
for the 19 or 20 years that we were workout partners, it was always, I knew that he was going to be waiting for me or I was going to be waiting for him. And because of that, like, I didn't want to disappoint him. Number one, because he'd kick my butt
Yes.
if I didn't show up. And number two, like, I wanted to make sure that I, stayed up with him, so that little bit of a competition, that little bit of
Yes.
accountability. I think it's true, not just for working out and for health, but for every aspect of our life.
Yeah. And that's when you gave a great example of how our emotions can work for us. You have an
Yes.
emotional connection to this person. You don't
Yeah.
want to
So good.
disappoint them. You don't want to feel bad, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so that's driving you to honor your commitment.
Right.
And
Right.
so many of us are built that way. Like
Right.
if I know that I have a coaching call with you, David, I'm going to move heaven and earth to do everything I can not to miss that, to be there for
Right.
you.
Right.
That's just how most of us are built. And
Mm.
when we can operate in that manner, that's
Hmm.
so good because I'm taking my emotions and they're working for me.
Yeah. I love
And
that. I
that's
love
how
that
you set
idea.
yourself up for success. It's you need a plan and people. And
People.
that is
Mm.
the winning formula for most of us.
I love that, plan and
Mhm.
people. Now, that's so good. Well, we've been talking a lot about our own internal emotions and understanding ourselves
Yeah,
as leaders. We said this before. We're leading humans. How do we
that's right.
understand others? What are some things that we can, what are some tools, tips, strategies to be able
Yeah,
to understand others?
that's so good. So, David, I'm going to back up and I'm going to identify and really kind of hone in so everybody understands where you and I are starting from.
Yeah, sure.
So, if we define emotional intelligence,
Mm.
it is the practice. I like to call it a practice because we get
Yeah.
a lot of opportunities to practice every
Yes, we
day.
do. We all do.
It is a practice. And
Yes.
sometimes practice goes well and sometimes it doesn't.
Right, right.
So it is
Exactly.
the practice of recognizing and understanding your own emotions, what we were
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah.
the emotions of others,
Yeah.
and using that awareness to effectively manage our own behavior and our relationships.
Oh, I love that. I
And
love
so
that.
that's why you and I are talking a lot about us because it starts with us. We're the
Starts with us.
foundation,
Yeah, sure.
understanding my emotions and my triggers. And that's why you and I talk about that because
Mm-hmm.
I can't even begin to understand other people if I don't
Mm.
start by understanding myself. And
Right.
so understanding my own triggers. And then it links over to other people. And a big tie into that is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
For me to be able to understand other people,
Yeah.
I've got to understand, I've got to try to put myself in their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to try to understand. And that's something
Yeah.
sorely missing right now
Yeah.
and in our country and the world at large
Yeah.
is if I'm a leader, especially David, and you're on my team, and I've noticed that maybe your work is slipping a little bit or you're running
Mm-hmm.
behind a bit,
Mm-hmm.
instead of the jumping off point being David's a slacker. What's going? I mean, I can't
Yeah.
believe he's late on this project again. He's running late getting into the office again. It's really more about, gee, something must be going on with David.
Mm-hmm.
Let
Mm.
me start with that. Let me start by saying, hey, David, is everything okay? What
Yeah.
can I
Yeah.
do to help you? I'm noticing that maybe you're running late on some projects. You're not where you used to be. What's going on?
What's
And
happening?
I
Yeah.
think that COVID shined a light that has to be a starting point for leaders.
Yeah.
Even if you determine that someone maybe is slacking for whatever reasons, we have got
Mm.
to start with that human connection piece.
Right.
That is the heartbeat of social intelligence is
Mm.
the first place I've got to go with you is I've got to extend empathy. And I've got to
Yeah.
just stop the noise in my own head and I've got to
Mm.
connect to you as a person, David. And I've
Yeah.
got and that requires a huge dose of empathy. And I
Yeah.
think I was sharing with you, David, that on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, there was an
Yeah.
article January 13th of this year.
Yeah.
It talked about what does success look like in 2025?
Mm-hmm.
Emotional intelligence. The starting
Interesting.
point, empathy.
Oh, love that. I love
Is
that.
empathy.
So just ties all together. Well, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that there are a number of leaders who that comes naturally to. And then there are
Yeah.
a number of leaders who it doesn't come naturally to. How do we like help those leaders who it doesn't come naturally to get better at
Yeah.
empathy?
It's like the journaling thing. You
Mm,
have to start with the low hanging fruit, the thing that you think doesn't make a difference. Oh, that's too
yeah.
easy. That sounds like that won't work because it's got to be harder than that.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't have to
No.
be harder than that. And I
Yeah.
think, again, a plan and a person. So
Mm,
if you're a leader and
yeah,
you're like,
that's
I
good.
need to connect better to my people, how do I start with that? How
Mm-hmm.
about some one on one meetings where you're
Oh,
the
that's good.
listener, where you're
That's
just
good.
the listener? You're practicing that active listening
Yes.
because, and that would, for a lot of people that are used to talking or directing,
Mm.
that's going to scramble your eggs.
Yes,
To
exactly.
just have a meeting one on one or small group where you are listening to the concerns of your team.
Mm-hmm.
If a lot of
Yeah.
leaders who thought this isn't for me or we've got to go fast and hard, if you want to make that switch and you want to know what's the starting point, that's the starting point. It's
Yeah.
having a one on one with someone,
Yeah, that's
asking
good.
how they're doing. What can you do if you're in a position to help them? What
Mm.
does that look like? What do they need? What are the things they need to
Yeah.
make their job better? Or maybe
Sure.
if there's something going on in their life that you should be aware of.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, for the leaders that are really interested in driving change and more engagement, which is also a problem, it
Mm-hmm.
really starts with having a meeting where you're the listener.
Mm.
It's that simple.
Regina, that's so good, and it's so and it is simple, and it's not easy, right?
That's right. Simple, not easy.
Two different things. Yeah,
That's right.
I'm so glad that you said that because I think that there's so much need in our world today for leaders to be listeners and not speakers, and I think too often we forget that. Too often as leaders,
Do.
we've been programmed to think that we have to have all the answers. But really, in a world that's changing so rapidly,
Yes.
there's no way that we can have all of the answers. We need each
No.
other. We have to be connected. So going back to having a plan and having people, right? This is the people part
Mm-hmm.
of it and being able to connect with people.
And having a great coach, the people part, having a
Yeah,
great coach. I
yeah,
think if you're a leader and you really want to make this shift,
yeah.
without that accountability of coming to a coach, and we know that the greatest people in business and sports and in industries
Mm-hmm.
have these either peer support groups or they have
Yep.
coaches.
Right, right.
Why do the best athletes and the best CEOs have coaches?
Yeah.
Because it works.
And they want to
Because
get
it works.
better.
Because you want
Yeah,
to get better.
yeah,
And if I'm a leader, David, and I say, gosh, I really want to apply empathy, David, this year, and I really want to
yeah,
increase engagement. And you're like, okay, Regina, I'm going to give you these two strategies. Go be a
yeah,
listener. And if I've got to report back to you on what happened,
Yeah.
that's how I'm going to get better. Having to
Yeah.
come and talk to you about how did that go? What worked,
Yes.
what didn't work. So that
Right.
people part really is either that supportive accountability group, a
Mm,
mastermind group, but that nothing is, I don't think anything works greater than having a coach,
yeah.
someone that is invested in you and that is
Mm,
just there for you to extract your best potential.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I had to come and meet with you every week, David, about how did it go with my team, I think I'm going to get better.
You're going to get better. Yeah,
I'm going to get
absolutely.
better.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, and this is, this is what this podcast is all about. It's about
Mm-hmm.
continual growth and continually pushing beyond where you are right now because you want to get better. So those of you who are listening, I know
Yeah.
that you're listening because you want to continue to grow. You want to continue to improve. And this is one way as a leader, just as a human, to be able to
Yeah.
grow and grow.
And
One of the, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Oh,
I
one of
think,
the,
David,
go ahead. I'm sorry. We're
I'm
so
going to let you
excited.
ask the question.
Well, here's where my head went to, Regina, is that I know that, and I said this earlier, for some people, it's easier than other people to do
Mm-hmm.
some of these things and have some of this awareness. One of the tools that you use, if I'm remembering right, couples the emotional intelligence assessment with the DISC assessment, so we can
Oh my gosh.
couple DISC our personality or our behaviors with our
Mm-hmm.
emotions. How do those two kind of come together, and how do you like bridge that?
Oh my gosh, that's my favorite assessment ever
Yeah,
is the
yeah,
DISC and EQ combo assessment. I have
love it.
never seen a report like this.
Mm-hmm.
And the ahas that I've had myself with my own and with
Sure,
clients has just been so impactful.
amazing.
So when you think about your personality style, and a lot of us are familiar with DISC and
Sure.
personality styles, when you integrate it with EQ,
Mm-hmm.
it takes that whole level of self-awareness to an entirely new level.
Another level,
Because as
yeah.
an I personality, I understand, okay, here are the characteristics of an I, whether I meet all those or not.
Mm-hmm.
And what EQ allows, what the emotional intelligence piece allows me to do is it says, I am an I, but what are my goals? What are my intentions? Can being an I, where does being an I help me? And where does being an I hurt me so that I have
Mm.
that awareness? So I'll give you a
Yeah.
great example. I was having my first ever conversation with Paul, our mentor, our friend, Paul
Yes.
Martin. I was having my first kind of business conversation for how can Paul and I work together. Now, this
Mm-hmm.
is going to be so great for everybody listening because Paul is a D, as we know. He's very
Mm-hmm.
driven, he's direct, he's results
Direct.
oriented. And I know
Yeah.
that you have a lot of D in you also, David,
Sure.
but
Sure.
we know Paul is a high D.
High D.
And
Yeah.
I am more I. Now,
Mm.
my D has grown. I was an IS and now I'm an ID. But
Mm-hmm.
Paul knows that I'm an I. My S is very high. So that makes me more of a people person. And
Yeah.
Paul is more task oriented. I'm more people oriented. So before this meeting with Paul, I started preparing myself mentally. And I said, okay, Regina, you're an I. He's a D. But my emotional intelligence, it's my GPS, right? It
Right.
guides me as I live out my values and my intentions.
Mm.
My intention was to have a great business call with Paul and for
Mm-hmm.
him to know that I would be a great person to work with. That was my
Mm.
intention. That was my goal on this call.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to shift and make myself less I and more D. So I
Mm-hmm.
said, I'm going to be brief. I'm going to be direct. I'm going to say to the point. It's hard for us eyes. That's so hard
Yes.
sometimes.
Yes. Got to keep those bullet
And so,
points,
because
right?
we want to talk, we want to talk, we want to have fun. And I said, no,
Yeah.
because I know my audience.
Mm-hmm.
So it allowed me to shift from my natural style, what comes easy and comfortable to me, and shift a little bit into D mode because
Yeah.
that's what makes you an influencer is if I
Right.
can adapt and adjust to others, that makes me the
Yes.
person of influence in the
Yeah.
conversation. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's who I wanted to be. And so it amazed me because Paul was thinking the same.
Yeah.
He
The same.
thought Regina is an I. She's got a lot of S. I
Yeah.
want to be relational. So we
Right.
get on the phone together. I'm trying to be more deep. Paul trying.
How did you
So
guys
it's
meet in the
funny
middle?
because he's asking me how was my this was an early 20 2021.
Okay.
He's like, it was January. How was your Christmas? How's the
Yeah.
family? And I'm
Yeah.
trying to give short answers because Megan told me
But
I only
yeah.
have 30 minutes. Why is
Right.
Paul asking me all these personal questions?
I don't have time for this.
we,
Oh,
we don't have
funny.
time for this. We got to get down to business because you're a D and I know that's what you want. And
Right.
he's being so thoughtful. How's
Yeah.
Roger? How's
That's great.
Andrew? How's your mom?
Yes.
And I'm like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
And
Wait a second.
he was he was leaning into me.
Yeah.
This is the magic of that DISC EQ
Combo.
combination, assessment, understanding, is
Mm-hmm.
that my best way of utilizing myself is to
Yeah.
adapt and adjust to others because
Mm-hmm.
that's how I can best connect. And I was
Yeah.
thinking that, and Paul was thinking that. And we
Yeah.
had
That's,
and about a year and a half later, we had a big laugh about it
I'll bet.
because
Yeah.
about this, because I said, Paul, do you remember that conversation? He goes, I do.
That's so funny. I
And
love that.
that's how the magic happens. Is I know his style, I know my style. Okay,
Yeah.
EQ says it's my inner GPS.
Mm-hmm.
If I know my values and my intentions, if I know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to achieve, my EQ can guide me. So I'm not
Right.
just an I, like I'm just some
Right.
out of control I. I can be focused and directed because those are my values.
And I loved too that the fact that because you are emotionally intelligent, you're understanding that I need to adapt. I want to adapt because I want to
That's
connect
right.
to this other person.
Mhm.
And I think that if there's one thing that I would like for people to take away is that's one of the keys to having the power of understanding and having some levels, higher
Yes.
levels of emotional intelligence is to be able to connect with others. Because let's face it, leadership is influence, and we want to influence to the extent that
That's right.
we accomplish our goals, we achieve our objectives, and help
Right.
others achieve theirs. And so that takes that connection piece.
And that's the goal of emotional intelligence, is to act appropriately in the face of daily challenges or whatever the
Mm,
circumstance you find yourself
yeah,
in. So
right.
whatever the circumstance I'm in a meeting with Paul, I'm with you, I'm wherever, the
Hmm.
goal of is to use my emotional intelligence to act appropriately. What would
Yeah.
be the best thing I can do for myself and this person in this moment? If
Hmm.
I'm operating at that level, that's emotional intelligence.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. I love that. Well, I know that for the people in the audience who heard you at my summit a couple of years ago,
How
I
much
know,
fun was that?
oh, that was so much fun. I'm sure they're sitting back going, oh my gosh, Regina's session was explosive and just so fun. I love that. How can they get in touch with you? How can people understand,
Yeah.
maybe take an assessment? Where can they go to understand their emotional intelligence?
Well, my website is the best place to keep up with me, reginabryan.com. That's it, my name,
Yes.
reginabryan.com, or social media. But on my website, there's a page and they're all about assessments, and it gives you all the assessments I offer. You can
Cool.
purchase it right there on my website. There's
Love it.
also my calendar of events, and I'm going to have
Awesome.
some free things, some complimentary things on Zoom. We can work
Nice.
together in small groups. However you want to work with me. I do coaching clients,
I
workshops,
love that.
and I'm really excited about all those things for 2025. And
Mm.
the last message I wanted to make sure, David, since you talk
Yes.
to organizations and
Mm.
leaders, emotional intelligence is your greatest competitive advantage.
Oh, I love that. I love
It
that.
is an untapped business strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the year that you can unlock that.
Mm,
Because the
mm-hmm.
leaders, when we think about technology and AI and all that's going on in the world, I
Yeah.
really want my leaders out there, and everybody's a leader, but in particular, if you're leading organizations and teams,
Yeah.
your self awareness and your level of empathy is
Mm-hmm.
what will differentiate you. That will
Yep.
allow you to that will allow you to stand apart and separate yourself. And
Yes.
everybody who's in positions where they're like, well, what's going to happen with AI? If you can really get in touch with your own self awareness, if you can grow and develop your emotional intelligence, that's your
Mm-hmm.
competitive advantage.
Mm. Yes, I
Yeah,
love that. Competitive advantage is everything. I
it's
love that.
everything.
Having
Yeah.
that advantage, even if it's just 3 seconds. And the only person, if he's listening, that will apply to is my workout partner. He and I I beat him one year in a triathlon by 3 seconds. So anyway, so if he's listening, he'll have a big laugh out of that. But the
That is
competitive advantage
fantastic.
is awesome. Regina, thank you so much. I want to tell our listeners, go out and follow Regina. Go to her website, reginabryan.com. We'll put those in the show notes as well, the
Yeah.
links, her LinkedIn. Make sure you connect with her on LinkedIn. She
There's always
shares,
videos and stuff
yes,
there.
you've got all kinds of great content. So thank you so much for being here, my friend. I love this whole idea and this whole realm of emotional intelligence and how we can continue to grow in that realm. So thank you.
Thanks, David.